Welcome back to our series on breaking out the FMS. On this one we're going to be covering the shoulder mobility screen. Shoulder mobility screen is actually one of the most controversial, I guess, or debated movements on the functional movement screen. One of the big issues that we hear is that it doesn't cover enough. So that's kind of what these breakouts are all about, is we find the big stuff when we go over the functional movement screen with the 7 movements. And then once we find what the weakest link is, we can zero in on that movement, break it out a little bit more, and get a little bit more information. And that's what we're going to do today when we break out the shoulder mobility screen. So when I take someone through a movement screen and they're one on the shoulder mobility, and if you don't know how to do the shoulder mobility screen, just click on the link above this video and it'll take you to me and Jared going over a video on how to perform and score the shoulder mobility. But once you have the shoulder mobility score and it's a 1, then we want to start breaking it out. And honestly, sometimes when someone's a 3-3, sometimes I still want to dig a little deeper into their shoulder mobility and get a little bit more information. You may or may not want to do that, but you'll see why as I go further. So the first time we're going to look at, once they're a 1 or potentially a 3, is the impingement. So that's the same thing as on the FMS. We're just going to look. Go ahead and put your hand on your shoulder. One of the biggest issues we see is when people lift their elbow up, their palm comes up with it. We want them to keep their palm pressed into the shoulder and just go ahead and lift the elbow up. Other side, check it out. Any pain? Cool. So all we're checking for right now is pain on these impingement things. The next one we're going to do is the AC impingement. So just reach your arm across your chest and just kind of grab and pull across your body. And is there any pain with that? Other side. Any pain? Cool. So no pain on either one of those impingement tests. Next thing we're going to check is the neck. So just go ahead and stand right here in front of me. Yeah, face to face. And I just want you to turn your head all the way one direction over your shoulder. And then touch your chin down. Okay, come back up, other direction. And down. So I'm looking at 2 things. I'm looking, can she get her head symmetrically turned on both sides? So I'm looking for symmetry, and I'm looking to see if she can get over her shoulder and touch her chin down to her clavicle. So if she has pain with that, which is the biggest thing I'm looking for, on the impingement, the AC impingement, or this neck clearing, I'm really looking for pain as my biggest factor. So when we do the breakouts, I'm sending them down certain paths depending on what I find from the breakouts. If they have pain on any of these, this is the path where I'm referring out to a clinician to try to either look at the impingement and tell me what it's coming from, tell me maybe some more information that they can get that I might not have, or with the neck, try to get the mobility in the neck, because that's not something that I necessarily specialize in, nor do most personal trainers. So those are what I'm looking for pain first. If there is a little bit of asymmetry on the neck, but there's no pain, then I'm going to see if some of the T-spine mobility stuff that we're going to do could potentially clear the neck when I go back and check later. And hopefully it will, and a lot of times it does. Next, we're going to check breathing in a couple different positions, because if they're not, track number 2 that we're looking at on here is to see if we need to do a restorative breathing track, or if we can just move on to mobility and stability. So I'll go ahead and have you lay down on your back. So first thing I'm doing, I'm checking supine breathing. Perfect. It's just looking how they're naturally breathing. I'm not doing any cueing or anything. I'm just kind of looking at the positioning too of her posture in the supine position, and taking any notes that I might want to put down. So I'm looking at natural breathing, and then I'm going to tell her to take a big inhale and exhale. So I'm looking for diaphragmatic breathing, looking for belly breathing, looking for 360 expansion from the stomach, the sides, and the low back. But another big thing I'm looking for in the supine position is rib positioning. I want to see if there's a big rib flare or not, because a lot of times if there is a big rib flare, then that is the cause of some shoulder mobility issues because of positioning and just overall function of the core. So looking for rib flare. If I see rib flare, I'm going to note that. If the breathing is from the neck or it's not diaphragmatic breathing, then we're sending her down the breathing path. And we would start obviously in the supine position. While we're down there, I'm just going to flip over and we're going to check crocodile breathing. Same things. We're looking to see if it's diaphragmatic breathing, if she's getting air into her back, her sides, and her back should be rising off the ground. And actually, like, her hips and stuff should be rising off the ground because she's getting air into her belly, which is kind of lifting her body a little bit. Looking at the neck and shoulders to see if she's getting air into the shoulders, or I don't want that. Ideally, we want the breath to be through the canister and not there up in the neck and throat and shoulders and stuff. So those accessory muscles we don't want working during the breathing. We want diaphragmatic breathing. So we're checking in this position too to see if she can get it. Sometimes people have it in supine, they don't have it in this position, or vice versa. So we want to make sure we note that, because in those positions when we're training them, we want to make sure that we get breathing down before we train them in those positions, or any positions that are more complex than that. From there, go ahead and stand up. One of the big reasons I'm doing the shoulder mobility screen in the first place is to see what I'm going to red light. So really I'm going to be red lighting things that involve scapular function and overhead pressing. So why not start to kind of screen the overhead press? So we screen breathing in those two positions, but I want to screen, just kind of see how she breathes with her arms over her head. Maybe she nails breathing in those two positions, but when she puts her arms overhead, there's a breathing dysfunction. I may or may not want her to then have weights overhead if she can't breathe in that position. Especially if there has to be a compensation whenever she takes a breath with the arms overhead. So all I'm going to ask her, and we'll get back to this again, is to put your arms over your head. And I just want you to take a breath. So with this arms overhead, I'm looking at a couple different things. I'm looking at, can she get the breath? Or she starts to kind of freak out when her arms are over her head or the breath pattern is altered. Another thing I'm looking for is, when I ask her to lift her arms over her head, I'm looking to see if she can get her arms just naturally back in line with her ears without a compensation to the core, like hyperextension or rib flare or bending the knees or whatever the compensation might occur to get the arms back. So I want a perfect canister from ear to shoulder to hip to knee to ankle in a perfect line, those arms straight up, ribs down, before I have someone do an overhead press. Because if they can't get their arms in the position without weight, I definitely don't want to load that pattern. So we check the positioning, you're good. We check the breathing, and now I want to check that same pattern against the wall to see if there's any mobility or stability restrictions there. So I'm just going to have you stand up against the wall. I want your butt touching the wall. Let's go heels touching the wall, butt touching the wall, back touching the wall, head touching the wall. And I just want you to do thumbs up for me. Yep. And keep them here. And I just want you to bring your arms up and then touch your thumbs to the wall. So once again, I'm looking to see if she made those same compensations as I asked her when she put her arms over her head. Sometimes you'll see either the ribs come up, the back come off the wall, or the arms just won't get to the wall. Go ahead and bring your arms down. If you see a major rib flare with someone, you can put your hands on their ribs, hold them down, do the same thing. And sometimes as you hold the ribs down, now the thumbs won't get to the wall, and you know then we have a mobility restriction there. So do a press, thumbs on the wall. Next thing we're going to do is seated T-spine rotation. Just go ahead and have a seat right there.
Facing.
Put that palm between the knees, squeeze it, feet together. So what we want, the feet together, something squeezed between the knees to stabilize the lower body. Put that across your chest and crisscross your arms like this. And your arms on your chest. Cool. So all I'm doing here is getting behind her. I'm kind of looking from up above. If you need a stool or whatever, that's fine. And I just want to cue her to keep your arms on your chest and twist as far as you can to the right or left. Cool. And I'm looking for 45 degrees. Go ahead and go the other way. So ideally, she'll have more than 45 degrees on each side, and it would be symmetrical. If she has less than 45 degrees, then we're going to go down the mobility path, and we're going to work on T-spine mobility and not go down the stability path and work on scapular stability. So one thing I did miss when going over the arms up overhead, go ahead and come back, stand right here. I just want to look at basic static posture and look at the positioning of the scapula and the T-spine whenever she's doing the overhead stuff. So go ahead and look at that, punching back, and go ahead and lift your arms over your head. So when she lifts her arms overhead here, I'm just checking to see if her scapula are like coming way off, and I'm looking at her spine angle. So I can feel in here there's a pretty big cavity between the shoulder blades where her T-spine is a little flat through here, so I know she's got a flatter T-spine. So I don't want to go ahead and lower your hands down. When that happens, I don't want to give somebody a lot of extension exercises. Sometimes we need to get a little bit more kyphosis through the T-spine to neutralize things, to make sure that the scapula can stabilize on the rib cage and everything is in good alignment there. So a flat T-spine, we don't want to be giving more extension exercises. We actually want to get a lot of kyphosis. So I'm looking at that too, because that's going to determine if I'm going to go with breathing exercises that are going to be in a kyphotic posture or an extended posture. So one thing that on the FMS that I really should do that we don't do that often is grip strength. So a dynamometer to check side to side to see if basically there's a discrepancy between side to side. If one side is like 60 pounds and one side is like 20 pounds, we know there could be a stability and motor control issue on that side, and that's something we would need to address with stability and motor control exercises. So impingement and cervical range of motion going down the pain track. Supine breathing, crocodile breathing, arms up breathing. We're looking to see if there's breathing in those positions. If not, we're going down the breathing track. With the static T-spine and scap assessment, we're just looking to see the different posture, to see like what positions we should have them breathe in. And if the scapula are hanging off, we're going to go down a stability track. If someone's extremely kyphotic and all bunched up looking, we know we're going to go down the mobility track. The overhead press, we're looking at stability and mobility there. If they bring their arms up over their head and go into a lordotic posture or extension, then we want to check them against the wall and see if it was a mobility or a stability issue there. If they can touch the wall with their ribs down, it's not a mobility issue, and we want to send them down the stability track. If they can't get their arms up, then it's a mobility issue, we send them down the mobility track. See the T-spine rotation. If it's better than 45 degrees, they're good. If it's less than 45 degrees, it's a mobility issue. And then the grip strength, we know if there's any discrepancies there, then we have a motor control issue that we work on. And all the exercises will be listed under this video.